Joining us right now is Pennsylvania Congressman, member of the Foreign Affairs and Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Scott Perry. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Great to see you, Maria.
So your reaction to what you heard from the president. Let's talk about this $2.5 billion number in terms of the White House asking OMB for this supplemental money. Is this enough to ensure that this country is prepared? And how prepared are we, really?
Well, we need to be better prepared for sure, and I think this is a wake-up call to all of America about supply chains and critical things that we need, including medicines, many of them developed and coming from China, being produced in China, and the fact that we don't have the capacity to do that currently. So I think this is a wake-up call. We're going to look at the numbers. I think one of the most important things to be concerned with is testing, and of course increased or a shortened timeline for a vaccine, production of a vaccine. But testing currently, I think there's about a 2% fatality rate with the coronavirus as it currently stands. Just keep in mind that 1,000 people died last month in the United States of influenza. So we want to make sure we keep it in perspective, but we also want to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. I think the president's done a pretty darn good job when you consider about 8,000 people a week come into the United States from China. Testing and monitoring and knowing where those folks are in their condition, their status is critically important to making sure that we don't have an epidemic outbreak in the United States.
So what else is this money going to be used for? I recognize there are a handful of companies working on a vaccine or some kind of a treatment, but where else do you see the holes in terms of preparedness?
Well, I think it's really in treatment and early testing. Testing, like I said, is key. We have to identify who may be at risk, and it's also dealing with the logistics of the quarantining and of the increased the speed at which we can produce a vaccine. There are just things that we can't you can't beat the time continuum in certain ways, and that increased funding will allow a broader look at producing a vaccine much more quickly, and maybe working around some of the regulatory requirements for vaccine testing and approval. And I think that's where the president is heading. Again, I think the key right now is testing and identification.
Congressman, there's been some talk about the vulnerability of hospitals and medical workers in particular. In China, of course, a great number of these people have gotten sick. Do you think that our hospitals are ready for the stream of people that may start at any moment coming into emergency rooms and so forth? Are we ready to have isolated parts of hospitals and so forth to treat patients? What do you think? I mean, it seems to me that's another kind of line of defense.
That is part of the line of defense, and I think that some of this money will go towards that. I think we're more prepared than China was. As you saw, they were literally building hospitals from the ground up on location. I think we're more prepared for that. But again, this is a wake-up call when we can't get the simple items that we need to make sure that our hospital staff, our emergency our emergency responder staff is needing simple things like the masks and the protective clothing, oftentimes that is produced in China. And so, of course, they're using as much as is probably available right now, which leaves the rest of the world at a disadvantage. And so I think that potentially that's where part of the money is going to go. And those are some of the very simple things that we need to key on and focus on in preventing the spread of a possible outbreak in the United States.
So are we at risk for that right now? Because I was talking with one hospital executive a couple of weeks ago. He said that the ships have been told, turn around, don't deliver these things like the masks, like the plastic gloves to anybody because China needs them.
Well, I think we are potentially at risk, and that's where testing and identification is so important to make sure that anybody that is at risk is identified early and not allowed to assimilate into the population unchecked. And that's a very critical component. You can see that compared to other countries, we're doing very well. We're a large country, 320 million Americans, and you see the numbers, especially when you look at other countries, how well we're doing. But we can't let our guard down. As a matter of fact, it's probably time to continue to step up the programs as more countries and more localities become compromised.
I mean, what about the fact that, you know, the Chinese have completely taken control of the 3M facilities in China, right? I mean, what these these are American companies that are operating in China, but the Chinese government says, oh, we're going to take control of what's going on here rather than producing things for America and elsewhere.
Well, that's exactly right, and I think it's a wake-up call in so many ways. The fact that we are so dependent upon China. China has avowed, generally speaking, America is their enemy, and they're trying to be dominant economically, militarily, and so on and so forth. That's a huge wake-up call to all Americans in supply chains and companies and investors.
I was surprised when I heard that the Chinese government has asked to completely take over the 3M plants in China. Congressman, it's good to get your insights on all of this. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right. Scott Perry joining us there.